When two billionaire martial arts masters challenged a humble janitor to a fight, they thought they knew exactly how it would end. They were dead wrong. What happened next became the most viral moment in martial arts history, transforming lives and launching a movement that would shake the world. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story and comment on your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the globe. The ancient oak floors of the Crimson Tiger Dojo had witnessed thousands of battles, but none quite like what was about to unfold on this rain-soaked Tuesday evening in downtown Portland. Under the harsh glare of industrial lights, 43-year-old Ray Walker moved through the shadows with the practiced silence of a man who had learned to be invisible. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle with the same steady precision that had once held an M4 carbine in the mountains of Afghanistan. Each stroke across the polished wood was methodical, purposeful, a meditation that kept the ghosts at bay. The familiar scent of disinfectant and sweat filled his nostrils as he worked a strange comfort in the routine that had become his lifeline. "Daddy, I finished my math homework," came a soft voice from the corner of the dojo. 8-year-old Emma Walker sat cross-legged on a worn meditation mat, her school supplies spread around her like the tools of a tiny scholar. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around a face that bore an uncanny resemblance to her mother. The same warm brown eyes, the same determined set to her jaw that had first captured Ray's heart 12 years ago. "That's my smart girl," Ray replied, his voice carrying a warmth that contrasted sharply with the battle-hardened exterior the world saw. "Show me what you got." Emma bounded over her sneakers, squeaking against the floor. The worksheet in her small hands bore neat rows of multiplication problems, each one solved with the careful precision she had inherited from her father. As Ray knelt to review her work, the fluorescent lights caught the thin white scar that ran from his left temple to his jawline, a permanent reminder of an IED explosion that had claimed his entire unit except for him. "Perfect as always," he said, ruffling her hair. "Your mom would be so proud." The mention of Sarah brought that familiar tightness to his chest. 3 years had passed since the cancer had taken her, but the pain remained fresh as an open wound. She had been the one who believed in him when he came back broken from the war, who saw past the nightmares and the trembling hands to the man underneath. Now it was just him and Emma against the world, and some days that felt like an impossible fight. "Mr. Ray!" called out a young voice from across the dojo. 12-year-old Marcus Chen, Master Chen's grandson, waved enthusiastically as he adjusted his white belt. "Watch this kick." Ray looked up from Emma's homework to see the boy attempting a spinning heel kick, his form enthusiastic but unrefined. The technique was all wrong. His hip placement was off and his balance was compromised, but Ray said nothing. He had learned long ago that his observations weren't welcome here. He was the janitor, nothing more. "That was awesome, Marcus," Emma called out, always eager to encourage others. Her kindness was perhaps her most beautiful trait, though it worried Ray sometimes. The world had a way of taking advantage of kind hearts. As the evening advanced, the dojo began to fill with its usual roster of students. The Crimson Tiger wasn't just any martial arts school, it was one of the most exclusive dojos on the West Coast, catering to tech executives, trust fund kids, and anyone else who could afford the steep monthly fees. The students arrived in Tesla Model S sedans and BMW SUVs, their expensive gear bags slung over shoulders clad in designer workout clothes. Ray continued his cleaning invisible to most of the students who filtered past him. He had grown accustomed to being background noise in their lives, the help that kept their sanctuary clean and functional. But his trained eye never stopped cataloging their movements, their techniques, their weaknesses. Old habits died hard, especially for a man who had once been the Army's most decorated close-quarters combat instructor. Master Chen emerged from his office, his silver hair perfectly groomed despite his 72 years. Li Wei Chen was a legend in martial arts, circles a fifth-generation grandmaster whose lineage could be traced back to the Shaolin Temple itself. His presence commanded immediate respect, and the scattered conversations around the dojo fell silent as he surveyed his domain. "Good evening, everyone," Master Chen said, his accent still carrying traces of his childhood in Taiwan despite 5 decades in America. "Tonight we will focus on the harmony between mind and body. Martial arts is not about force, it is about understanding. Ray had heard these lessons countless times over the past 2 years, absorbing every word even as he pretended to focus on his cleaning duties. Master Chen's philosophy resonated with something deep in his soul, reminding him of the meditation techniques his old sergeant had taught him to deal with combat stress. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was learning more about fighting from overhearing these lessons than he had in years of military combat training. "Emma, honey, stay close to the wall," Ray murmured as the students began their warm-up routines. He had learned to keep his daughter out of the way during classes ever since one of the more aggressive students had complained about her presence to Master Chen. As the students moved through their forms, Ray found himself unconsciously analyzing their techniques. The tall blonde in the corner, Jessica, he thought her name was, had excellent flexibility, but poor balance. The stocky businessman near the mirrors had power, but telegraphed every move. The twin sisters who had recently joined. His thoughts were interrupted as those very twins made their entrance. Ava and Sierra Hale moved through the dojo like they owned it, which, considering their family's net worth, they very well might someday. At 28, the identical twins had built a tech empire that made them 2 of the youngest billionaires in the country. Their company, Hale Dynamics, had revolutionized artificial intelligence, and their success had only amplified their already considerable arrogance. Both sisters were striking tall, athletic, with platinum blonde hair that they wore in identical high ponytails. Their custom-made GIs were pristine white with gold embroidery, and their black belts were clearly expensive, probably handcrafted in Japan. They moved with the confidence of people who had never been told no in their lives. "Master Chen," Ava called out, her voice carrying across the dojo with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "We need to discuss the tournament preparation schedule." Sierra nodded in agreement, her pale blue eyes scanning the room dismissively. "The current training regimen isn't intensive enough for competitors of our caliber." Ray noticed how the other students shifted uncomfortably at the twins' arrival. The sisters had only been training at the dojo for 6 months, but their natural athleticism combined with private lessons had accelerated their progress rapidly. They had tested from their black belts at other schools. Rumors suggested their families' donations had influenced those decisions, and now they treated the Crimson Tiger as their personal training ground. "Patience, young ones," Master Chen replied, his tone diplomatic but firm. "Skill cannot be rushed. True mastery takes—" "With respect, Master," Ava interrupted. "We've already mastered the basics. We need advanced techniques if we're going to represent this dojo in competition." As the sisters continued their discussion with Master Chen, Ray retreated to the storage room to refill his cleaning supplies. The small space was cramped with equipment and uniforms, but it offered a moment of privacy that he desperately needed. The stress of maintaining his facade of invisibility was wearing on him, especially when every instinct screamed at him to correct the fundamental flaws he saw in the twins' supposedly advanced techniques. Through the thin wall, he could hear Emma humming quietly to herself as she worked on her reading homework. The sound brought a smile to his weathered face. She was his anchor, his reason for getting up each morning and facing another day of being treated as less than human. For her, he could endure anything. "Daddy," Emma's voice called softly, "can I get some water?" "Of course, sweetheart," Ray replied, emerging from the storage room. "There's a fountain by Master Chen's office." As Emma skipped toward the water fountain, Ray noticed that the evening's training session was moving into sparring exercises. The students paired off their movements, becoming more aggressive as they tested their skills against one another. Master Chen moved between the pairs, offering corrections and guidance with the patience of a true teacher. Ray had just returned to mopping when he heard Emma's distressed voice. "Excuse me, I just need to get some water." He looked up sharply to see his daughter standing beside the water fountain, looking small and intimidated. Ava Hale was standing directly in front of the fountain, blocking access, while she adjusted her belt and checked her reflection in the mirror above it. "Excuse me," Emma repeated a little louder this time. Ava glanced down at the 8-year-old with obvious irritation. "Do you see I'm using this space?" "Wait your turn. I just need a quick drink." Emma said, her voice beginning to waver. Please. Listen, kid, Sierra said, approaching to support her sister. This isn't a playground. Adults are training here. Ray felt his jaw clench, but he forced himself to continue mopping. Emma could handle this. She was stronger than she looked, just like her mother had been. But I'm really thirsty, Emma persisted, showing the same quiet determination that had gotten her through her mother's illness and death. I'll be super quick. Are you deaf? Ava snapped, her voice carrying across the dojo and causing several students to turn and stare. I said wait. That was enough. Ray abandoned his mop and moved toward his daughter, but Master Chen was already there. Ava, please, the elderly master said gently. The child only needs a moment. With respect, Master Chen, Sierra interjected, we pay premium rates for training here. We shouldn't have to work around. She gestured dismissively at Emma. Babysitting arrangements. This is a place of learning for all, Master Chen replied, his voice carrying a steel undertone that his students rarely heard. Age does not determine worth. Ava rolled her eyes and stepped aside with exaggerated reluctance. Fine, but this is getting ridiculous. What's next? Are we going to have toddlers crawling around during advanced classes? Emma hurried to the fountain, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Ray wanted nothing more than to comfort her, but drawing attention to the situation would only make things worse. Instead, he caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod, which she returned with a brave smile. As the sparring session resumed, Ray noticed that several students were stealing glances at Emma, whispering among themselves. The twins had succeeded in making his daughter the center of unwanted attention, and the protective instincts that had made him a formidable soldier began to stir. Daddy, I'm okay, Emma whispered when she returned to her corner. But Ray could see the hurt in her eyes, the same look she'd worn during her mother's final days when the other children at school had started treating her differently. The training session continued for another hour, with the Hale sisters dominating every sparring match they entered. Their technique was flashy and aggressive, designed more to impress than to demonstrate true martial arts principles. Ray watched them steamroll through opponent after opponent, their arrogance growing with each victory. Is there anyone here who can actually provide a challenge? Ava asked loudly as she finished demolishing a brown belt student who outranked her by 2 years of training. Seriously, Sierra added, barely breathing hard despite the intense workout. We're wasting our time with these amateurs. Master Chen frowned at the display of disrespect, but before he could respond, Ava's gaze fell on Ray, who was quietly cleaning the mirrors near the sparring area. What about him? She said with a cruel smile. The janitor's been watching us all night. Maybe he thinks he could do better. The dojo fell silent. Every student turned to stare at Ray, who continued cleaning as if he hadn't heard the comment. But Emma had heard it, and Ray could see her small hands clenching into fists. I'm serious. Ava continued, her voice growing louder. You've been studying our techniques all evening. Think you learned something, old man? Sierra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Come on, Ava. Look at him. Probably hasn't thrown a punch in his life. Actually, Ava said, her tone turning more cutting, it might be fun. David versus Goliath, except this time Goliath wins. Ray felt every eye in the dojo on him. His hands tightened on the cleaning cloth, and for just a moment, he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had once made him the most feared soldier in his unit. But then he looked at Emma, saw the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes, and forced himself to remain calm. I'm just here to clean, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the ventilation system. That's what I thought, Ava said with satisfaction. All watching, no action, just like every other. Enough. Master Chen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. This behavior is unacceptable. Martial arts teaches respect for all people regardless of their station in life. Oh, please, Sierra scoffed. We're just having fun. Right, janitor? You don't mind a little teasing. Ray met her gaze for the first time, and something in his eyes made her take an unconscious step backward. There was a depth there, a hardness earned through experiences that her privileged life couldn't imagine. But he said nothing, simply returned to his cleaning. Daddy, Emma's small voice carried across the silence. You don't have to let them talk to you like that. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. His 8-year-old daughter was defending him, showing more courage than he was managing to muster. The weight of his failures as a soldier who had survived when his brothers hadn't, as a husband who couldn't save his wife, as a father who was failing to provide the life his daughter deserved, crashed down on him all at once. "Listen to that," Ava said with mock sweetness. "Even the kid knows her daddy's a coward." That did it. Ray slowly set down his cleaning supplies and turned to face the twins. When he straightened to his full height, the change in his bearing was immediate and dramatic. The slouched posture of a defeated man was replaced by the ramrod straight stance of a soldier. His gray eyes, which had seemed tired and distant moments before, now blazed with controlled fury. "What did you just call me?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying clearly across the dojo. For the first time that evening, Ava Hale looked uncertain. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did," Ray said, taking a step toward her. "You meant every word. You've spent all evening disrespecting Master Chen's teachings, intimidating students, and bullying my daughter. And now you want to call me a coward." The transformation was so complete that several students gasped audibly. This wasn't the invisible janitor they had grown accustomed to ignoring. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. "Look, we were just joking around," Sierra said, but her voice lacked its previous confidence. "No need to get upset." "Upset?" Ray's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Lady, you have no idea what upset looks like." Master Chen stepped forward, sensing the situation spiraling beyond his control. "Ray, perhaps." "No, Master Chen," Ray said, his eyes never leaving the twins. "They want to see what this old janitor can do. Maybe it's time they found out." The silence in the dojo was deafening. Emma watched with wide eyes as her father, her gentle, quiet father who read her bedtime stories and made her pancakes on Sunday mornings, became someone she had never seen before. Someone formidable. "You want to spar with us?" Ava asked, trying to regain her composure. "Fine. But when we're done with, you don't come crying to Master Chen about getting hurt." "I won't be the one getting hurt," Ray replied, and something in his tone made it sound less like a boast and more like a simple statement of fact. As the students formed a circle around the sparring area, Ray walked to the center of the mat. With each step, more of his true nature emerged from beneath years of carefully constructed invisibility. His movements became fluid, predatory, like a wolf that had been disguised as a sheep finally shedding its costume. Emma clutched her homework to her chest, watching as her father prepared to face down two opponents who had dominated every challenger that evening. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew that this moment would change everything. In the corner of the dojo, Master Chen watched with growing recognition. There was something familiar about Ray's stance, something that spoke of training far beyond anything the Crimson Tiger could provide. As the old master's eyes narrowed, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began falling into place. The rain continued to pound against the windows as Ray Walker, former Army Ranger, decorated war veteran, and the man once known to his enemies as the Steel Ghost, prepared to remind the world exactly who he had been before life had beaten him into submission. The invisible guardian was about to become visible, and God help anyone who stood in his way. The circle of students tightened around the sparring mat as Ray stepped into the center, his transformation from invisible janitor to something far more dangerous now complete. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, highlighting the scar that ran from temple to jaw, a reminder of battles fought in places these privileged students couldn't imagine. Ava and Sierra Hale moved to opposite sides of the mat, their expensive GIs rustling with each confident step. They had sparred together countless times, their twin telepathy, making them a formidable team against any single opponent. In their minds, this would be over in seconds, a humiliating lesson for the uppity janitor who had dared to challenge his betters. "Last chance to back down, old man," Sierra called out, rolling her shoulders in an elaborate warm-up display. "We won't go easy on you just because you're past your prime." Ray's response was to simply stand there, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing slow and controlled. To the untrained eye, he looked vulnerable, even helpless. But Master Chen, watching from the edge of the circle, noticed details that the others missed: the way Ray's weight was perfectly distributed, the subtle positioning of his feet, the alertness in his eyes that belied his relaxed posture. "Daddy," Emma whispered from her spot near the wall. her homework forgotten as she watched her father face down two opponents who had dominated everyone else that evening. Her small voice carried a mixture of fear and hope that cut straight to Ray's heart. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said without taking his eyes off the twins. "Just watch and learn." Ava smirked at the exchange. "How touching. Don't worry, little girl. We'll try not to hurt your daddy too badly." The cruelty in her voice was the final straw. Whatever restraint Ray had been maintaining dissolved like smoke in the wind. When he looked at Ava again, she actually took a step backward. There was something in his eyes now that spoke of violence so controlled, so refined, that it was almost an art form. "Rules are simple," Master Chen announced, though his voice carried an uncertainty that his students had never heard before. "First, to yield or be unable to continue loses. No strikes to the head or neck, no." "No rules," Ray interrupted quietly. "They want to see what this old janitor can do. Let them see everything." A murmur ran through the crowd of students. This wasn't how sparring matches worked at the Crimson Tiger. Master Chen's dojo emphasized control, discipline, safety above all else. But there was something in Ray's tone that suggested this had moved beyond a simple sparring session. "You heard him," Ava said with a vicious grin. "No rules. This is going to be even easier than I thought." Sierra cracked her knuckles with theatrical flair. "Should we attack together, or do you want to go one at a time? I'd hate for this to be over too quickly." "Together," Ava replied. "He asked for everything. Let's give it to him." The twins moved into position, their practiced coordination evident in every gesture. They had studied each other's fighting styles since childhood, turning their natural sibling bond into a devastating tactical advantage. Against any normal opponent, their combined assault would be overwhelming. Ray wasn't a normal opponent. As the sisters began their approach, time seemed to slow for everyone watching. Ray's stance shifted almost imperceptibly, his body language changing from relaxed to ready in the space between heartbeats. Years of military training, of life and death combat, of surviving when survival should have been impossible, all crystallized into this single moment. Ava struck first, her right fist driving toward Ray's solar plexus with the speed and precision that had earned her black belt. It was a perfect technique, textbook form, devastating power, flawless timing. It should have ended the fight before it truly began. Instead, Ray simply wasn't there. He moved like water flowing around Ava's punch with such fluidity that several students blinked in confusion, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The strike that should have connected with crushing force instead met empty air, and Ava found herself overextended and off balance. Before she could recover, Sierra's spinning heel kick came whistling toward Ray's ribs. The kick was perfectly timed to catch him while he was supposedly vulnerable from evading her sister's punch. It was the kind of combination that had dominated every sparring match they had fought in the past 6 months. Ray caught Sierra's leg in mid-kick. The sound of her shin slapping against his palm echoed through the dojo like a gunshot. Sierra's eyes widened in shock as she realized that her devastating kick, the technique that had dropped 3 different opponents in the past week, had been stopped cold by what appeared to be minimal effort. "Impossible," she breathed. Ray's grip on her leg tightened slightly, and Sierra felt her balance disappear entirely. With a subtle shift of his weight, he redirected her momentum, sending her stumbling backward into her sister. The twins collided in a tangle of arms and legs, their vaunted coordination betraying them for the first time since childhood. The crowd of students erupted in gasps and murmurs. Marcus Chen, Master Chen's grandson, stood slack-jawed near the edge of the mat. "Did you see how fast he moved?" he whispered to the student beside him. "He didn't even look like he was trying," came the awed response. Ava and Sierra untangled themselves quickly, their faces flushed with embarrassment and growing anger. They were Hale Industries executives worth billions of dollars, trained by the best instructors money could buy. They didn't lose to janitors. "Lucky break," Ava snarled, but her voice lacked its previous confidence. "Let's see you handle this." The twins separated, moving to flank Ray from opposite sides. This was their bread and butter, the pincer attack that had overwhelmed every opponent they had faced. One would engage while the other circled for the killing blow. Ray stood in the center of their formation, turning his head slightly to track both opponents. His breathing remained slow and controlled, as if he were still mopping floors rather than facing down 2 aggressive attackers. The transformation was so complete that Emma found herself wondering if this was really the same man who made her breakfast every morning. "Now!" Sierra shouted. Both twins attacked simultaneously, their strikes coming from opposite directions in a perfectly synchronized assault. Ava's left hook aimed for Ray's temple, while Sierra's right cross targeted his jaw. It was a combination designed to be impossible to defend against. No single person could block attacks coming from two directions at once. Ray proved them wrong. He dropped into a crouch so sudden and smooth that both punches sailed harmlessly over his head. Before either twin could adjust, he rose up between them like a force of nature, his hands moving with surgical precision. His left palm struck Ava's wrist, deflecting her follow-up punch and sending her spinning away. His right hand caught Sierra's extended arm, using her own momentum against her in a throw that sent her crashing to the mat with bone-jarring force. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. Sierra hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs in a harsh wheeze. She had been thrown before during training, but never with such authority, such complete dominance. As she struggled to catch her breath, she found herself staring up at Ray with something approaching fear. Ava, meanwhile, was discovering that her deflected punch had left her arm numb from wrist to shoulder. She flexed her fingers experimentally, wincing at the tingling sensation that suggested nerve damage. "How?" she gasped, cradling her affected arm against her chest. Ray's answer was to simply stand there waiting. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't even sweating. The man who had just dismantled their best combination attack looked like he was prepared to do it all day long. "This isn't possible," Sierra said as she climbed to her feet, her designer GI now wrinkled and grass-stained from her impact with the mat. "You're just a janitor." "Am I?" Ray asked quietly. There was something in his tone that made the question sound rhetorical. Master Chen stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concentration. As a young man in Taiwan, he had trained with masters whose skills bordered on the legendary. He had seen techniques that seemed to defy physics, witnessed demonstrations of martial arts that elevated the practice to something approaching magic. But this was different. This was combat experience, real deadly, forged in fires that his peaceful dojo had never seen. "Ray," Master Chen said carefully, "where did you learn to move like that?" Before Ray could answer, Ava let out a shriek of rage and launched herself at him again. Her technique had abandoned all pretense of martial arts discipline. This was pure aggression fueled by humiliation and the desperate need to prove that she hadn't just been dominated by the help. Ray sidestepped her charge with minimal effort. But this time, he didn't simply evade. His hand shot out in a knife-edge strike that caught Ava in the solar plexus, folding her in half as all the air rushed from her lungs. As she doubled over, gasping like a fish out of water, Ray's other hand came up in an uppercut that stopped just short of her chin. The message was clear. He could have ended the fight right there if he had chosen to. "Ava!" Sierra screamed, rushing to her sister's aid. But her emotional attack was even sloppier than Ava's had been telegraphed so obviously that Ray had already moved before she had completed her first step. He caught her wrist in mid-swing, twisted with surgical precision, and suddenly Sierra was on her knees, her arm locked in a position that sent lightning bolts of pain through her shoulder and elbow. One wrong move, one application of additional pressure and bones would break. "Yield," Ray said quietly. "Never," Sierra gasped through gritted teeth. Ray applied the slightest additional pressure and Sierra's defiance transformed into a scream of agony. "Yield," he repeated, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had given life and death orders in the world's most dangerous places. "I yield," Sierra sobbed. "I yield. Let me go." Ray released her immediately, stepping back as she collapsed beside her sister. Both twins lay gasping on the mat, their expensive GIs disheveled, their perfect hair hanging in sweaty tangles around faces red with exertion and shame. The silence in the dojo was absolute. Every student, every instructor, every person present had just witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of martial arts. Two black belts, arrogant ones perhaps, but skilled nonetheless, had been utterly dominated by a man they had dismissed as invisible. "Daddy," Emma's small voice cut through the silence like a silver bell. "Are you okay?" Ray turned toward his daughter, and the transformation was immediate. The dangerous predator who had just dismantled two opponents without breaking a sweat became once again the gentle father who read bedtime stories and helped with homework. His face softened, his posture relaxed, and when he spoke, his voice carried all the love in the world. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said. "Everything's fine now." But as Emma ran toward him, her face shining with pride and amazement, Ray caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Marcus Chen was holding up his cell phone, its camera obviously recording. The red recording light blinked like an accusatory eye, capturing everything that had just transpired. "Turn that off," Ray said sharply, his voice carrying enough command authority to make Marcus drop the phone like it was on fire. I wasn't," Marcus stammered. "Now," Ray repeated, and there was something in his tone that brooked no argument. Marcus quickly ended the recording, but the damage was done. In the age of social media, nothing stayed private for long. Ray could already envision the headlines, the viral videos, the attention that would inevitably follow. The careful anonymity he had built over the past 3 years was about to crumble. Master Chen approached slowly, his ancient eyes studying Ray with new interest. "You are not who you appear to be," he said. It wasn't a question. "None of us are," Ray replied, lifting Emma into his arms. She wrapped her small arms around his neck, and he could feel her trembling with excitement and residual fear. "That was amazing, Daddy," she whispered into his ear. "You were like a superhero. A superhero." If only she knew how far from the truth that was. Ray Walker wasn't a hero. He was a man haunted by the ghosts of every life he had failed to save, every battle he had survived when better men hadn't. He was a father struggling to provide for his daughter while carrying the weight of his own perceived failures. Ava Hale slowly climbed to her feet, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. Her perfect composure was gone, replaced by something ugly and vindictive. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the silent dojo. "Yes, it is," Ray replied without looking at her. "It's over and you lost. Accept it and move on." "You think you've won something," Sierra added as she struggled to stand still, favoring her twisted arm. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. We can destroy you." For the first time since the confrontation began, Ray smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the cold, predatory grin of a man who had faced down enemies that these privileged billionaires couldn't imagine. "Ladies," he said quietly, "you have no idea who you're dealing with either." The weight of his words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Several students shifted uncomfortably, sensing undercurrents they couldn't fully understand. Master Chen continued to study Ray with the intensity of a scholar examining a particularly complex text. "This conversation is finished," Master Chen announced, his voice carrying the authority of absolute rule within his domain. "Class is dismissed. Everyone out except Ray and Emma." The students filed out slowly, their excited whispers filling the air as they processed what they had witnessed. Marcus Chen cast one last look at Ray before following his grandfather's orders, but Ray could see the wheels turning behind the boy's eyes. The recording might be gone, but the memory would remain. When the dojo was finally empty except for the 3 of them, Master Chen locked the front door and turned to face Ray directly. 23 years I have run this school," the old master said. "In that time I have seen many fighters, many techniques, many different approaches to the martial arts. But what you demonstrated tonight, that was not learned in any dojo." Ray set Emma down gently, her small hand immediately finding his. "Master Chen, I can explain. You are a soldier." Master Chen continued, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Not was, are. The way you moved, the precision of your strikes, the economy of motion. I have seen such things only once before during my youth in Taiwan, when American Special Forces visited our temple." The old man's words hit Ray like physical blows. His carefully constructed identity was unraveling thread by thread, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "I'm just a janitor," Ray said weakly, but even he could hear how hollow the words sounded. "Bullshit," Master Chen replied, using profanity for perhaps the first time in the history of the Crimson Tiger Dojo. I may be old, but I am not blind. You are trained in arts that go far beyond what we teach here. Arts meant for killing, not sparring. Emma looked up at her father with wide eyes. Daddy, what is Master Chen talking about? How could he explain to his 8-year-old daughter that her gentle father had once been one of the army's most efficient killers? How could he tell her about the nightmares that still woke him, screaming about the ghosts that haunted his dreams, about the terrible things he had done in service to his country? It's complicated, sweetheart, he said finally. Master Chen moved closer, his weathered face softening slightly. Your secret is safe with me, he said quietly. But those girls, they will not forget what happened here tonight. And in their world, forgetting is the same as forgiving. They will seek revenge. Let them come, Ray replied, and there was steel in his voice. I've faced worse than a couple of spoiled rich kids. This is not about you, Master Chen said sharply. This is about her. He gestured toward Emma, who was still clinging to Ray's hand. They cannot touch you directly, you have proven that. But a child is vulnerable in ways that no amount of training can protect against. The words hit Ray like a sledgehammer to the chest. In his anger and his need to finally stand up for himself and his daughter, he had exposed them both to dangers he hadn't considered. The Hale twins had resources he couldn't match, connections he couldn't compete with, and the kind of vindictive nature that wouldn't let this humiliation stand. What do you think I should do? Ray asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Master Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying Ray's face as if trying to read his soul. Tell me your real name, he said finally. Ray hesitated, looking down at Emma's trusting face. Once he spoke the words, there would be no taking them back. The life he had built, the anonymity he had fought to maintain, would be gone forever. Ray Walker is my real name, he said slowly, but that's not what they used to call me. And what did they call you? Ray closed his eyes, remembering sand and blood and the screams of dying men. When he opened them again, Master Chen saw depths of pain and experience that no civilian should ever possess. The Steel Ghost, Ray whispered. Master Chen's intake of breath was audible. Even in the insular world of martial arts, certain legends transcended boundaries. The Steel Ghost was one of them, a special operations soldier whose exploits had become the stuff of whispered legends among military circles worldwide. A man who could appear and disappear like smoke, who could eliminate entire enemy squads without being detected, who had turned the art of war into something approaching ballet. You are him, Master Chen breathed. The soldier who saved the embassy in Kandahar, the man who held the bridge at Tal Afar for 6 hours against impossible odds. I'm not that man anymore, Ray said firmly. That man died in Afghanistan with the rest of my unit. I'm just a father trying to raise his daughter in peace. Daddy, Emma tugged on his hand. Were you really a soldier? Ray knelt down to her level, his hands gentle on her small shoulders. Yes, sweetheart. A long time ago, before you were born, Daddy was in the army. But that's all finished now. Now I'm just your daddy. Emma considered this with the serious expression she always wore when processing important information. Were you a good soldier? The question nearly broke Ray's heart. How could he explain that he had been very good at his job, too good perhaps, but that being good at killing didn't make someone a good person? I tried to be, he said finally. I tried to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Like you protected me tonight. Yes, Ray whispered, pulling her into a fierce hug. Exactly like that. Master Chen watched the exchange with growing understanding. Here was a man who had seen hell and survived it, who had done terrible things for good reasons, and who was now trying to find redemption in the simple act of being a father. It was a story as old as war itself. The girls will not let this rest, Master Chen repeated. And their reach extends far beyond this dojo. They have money, influence, connections at every level of society. If they decide to make your life difficult, then I'll handle it, Ray said, standing with Emma still in his arms. I've handled worse. But for how long? Master Chen pressed. How long can you fight their kind of war while protecting her? They will attack your job, your reputation, your ability to provide for your daughter. They will make you choose between your pride and her welfare. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ray had faced enemy fire, survived explosions, endured torture at the hands of insurgents who would have sold their souls for the chance to capture the Steel Ghost. But all of that seemed simple compared to the challenge of protecting his daughter from enemies who fought with lawyers and accountants instead of bullets and bombs. Maybe we should leave town, Ray said quietly. Start over somewhere else. Running away. Master Chen shook his head. That is not the man I just watched destroy 2 black belts. That is not the Steel Ghost. The Steel Ghost was a killer, Ray replied harshly. I won't let that man near my daughter. You think there are 2 different people living in your skin? Master Chen's voice carried the wisdom of decades spent studying human nature. You think you can separate the soldier from the father, the warrior from the protector. They are the same man, Ray Walker, the same man who served his country and the same man who loves his daughter. The skills that made you a great soldier are the same skills that make you a great father. Courage, determination, the willingness to sacrifice everything for those you love. Emma squirmed in Ray's arms, and he set her down gently. She immediately moved to the corner where her homework waited, sensing that the adults needed to have a conversation that wasn't meant for 8-year-old ears. What are you suggesting? Ray asked. Stop hiding, Master Chen replied simply. Stop pretending to be invisible. Those girls want a war. Give them one, but fight it on your terms, not theirs. I can't. You can, Master Chen interrupted. And you must, because if you don't, they will never stop. Men like the Hale family don't forgive perceived slights. They will hound you and your daughter for the rest of your lives, making sure you never find peace anywhere. Ray felt the weight of inevitability settling on his shoulders like a familiar burden. He had hoped that his days of fighting were over, that he could find peace in the simple routine of cleaning floors and raising his daughter. But peace, it seemed, was a luxury that men like him were never allowed to enjoy for long. If I do this, he said slowly, if I stop hiding, there's no going back. People will know who I am, what I've done. Emma will have to live with that knowledge. She will have to live with it regardless, Master Chen replied. The only question is whether she lives with it as the daughter of a man who stood up for himself and for her, or as the daughter of a man who let bullies drive them into a life of running and hiding. The truth of those words cut deep. Ray looked across the dojo at his daughter, who was bent over her homework with the same determination she applied to everything in her life. She deserved better than a father who jumped at shadows, who let fear dictate their choices. Daddy, Emma called out suddenly. I finished my reading assignment. Can we go home now? Ray smiled at her, feeling something shift inside his chest. Yes, sweetheart, we can go home. But as they gathered their things and prepared to leave the Crimson Tiger dojo, Ray Walker, formerly known as the Steel Ghost, began to formulate a plan. The Hale twins wanted war. They were about to discover that they had picked a fight with someone who had forgotten more about warfare than they would ever learn. The invisible guardian was about to become very visible indeed. And God help anyone who threatened his daughter. The walk home from the Crimson Tiger dojo felt different than any they had taken before. Emma's hand in his seemed smaller somehow, more precious, as if the events of the evening had reminded Ray just how fragile the life they had built together really was. The Portland streets glistened with rain under the amber streetlights, each puddle reflecting the neon signs of late-night businesses like fragments of a broken kaleidoscope. Daddy, Emma said as they waited at a crosswalk, her voice thoughtful in the way that always preceded her most difficult questions. Why did those ladies say mean things about us? Ray felt his chest tighten. How did you explain cruelty to a child who had already seen too much of it? How did you describe the casual viciousness of people who had never known real hardship, who treated others as obstacles to be removed rather than human beings deserving of respect? Some people, sweetheart, he said carefully, have never learned that being strong doesn't mean making others feel weak. Emma absorbed this with the serious concentration she applied to all of life's mysteries. But you made them feel weak, didn't you? When you fought them. The question hit deeper than Ray had expected. In his daughter's eyes, he had been heroic tonight, a protector, a champion standing up for what was right. But Ray knew the truth was more complicated. The man who had dominated Ava and Sierra Hale wasn't a hero. He was a weapon that had been forged in the crucible of war, tempered by loss and hardened by necessity. I showed them that they couldn't hurt us, Ray said finally. Sometimes that's the only language bullies understand. Their small apartment was a modest, two-bedroom unit in a complex that had seen better decades, but Ray had made it as warm and welcoming as his limited budget would allow. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, her books lined makeshift shelves in the living room, and photographs of Sarah smiled down from every available surface. It was home in the truest sense, not because of what it had, but because of who lived there. As Emma got ready for bed, Ray found himself standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the city lights and thinking about Master Chen's words. The old master had been right about one thing: the Hale twins wouldn't let this humiliation stand. They had the resources to make his life very difficult, and worse, they had shown they weren't above targeting Emma to get to him. Daddy. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with cartoon astronauts that Sarah had bought her the Christmas before she died. I can't sleep. Ray wasn't surprised. The events at the dojo would have been overwhelming for any child, let alone one who had watched her father transform from gentle janitor to something altogether more dangerous. Bad dreams? He asked, though he suspected the answer. Not dreams, Emma said, climbing onto his lap in the old recliner that had been Sarah's favorite spot. Questions. Lots and lots of questions. Ray wrapped his arms around his daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. These moments had become precious to him, the quiet times when it was just the two of them against the world, when he could pretend that love was enough to protect her from everything that waited beyond their door. Ask away, little scholar, he said, using the nickname that always made her giggle. Were you really the steel ghost? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ray closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his past settling around them like a shroud. He had hoped to keep that part of his life buried forever, to let his daughter grow up, knowing only the gentle father who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped with homework every evening. Yes, he said simply. A long time ago in a place very far from here, that's what they called me. Were you scary? The question was asked with such innocent curiosity that Ray almost smiled. I suppose I was to the people who were trying to hurt others, but I was never scary to the people I was protecting. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the same methodical approach she used for her math homework. Am I one of the people you're protecting? You're the most important person I'm protecting, Ray said, his voice thick with emotion. You're the most important person in the whole world. Then I'm not scared, Emma declared with the absolute confidence that only 8-year-olds could muster, because the steel ghost is my daddy, and he'll keep me safe. The simple faith in her voice nearly broke Ray's heart. She had no idea what that name really meant, what kind of man her father had been in the mountains of Afghanistan. She didn't know about the missions that had no official records, the enemies who had simply vanished without explanation, the reputation that had made hardened insurgents cross themselves when they heard his name whispered in the darkness. But maybe she didn't need to know. Maybe it was enough that she understood he would do anything to protect her. I love you, Emma Walker, he whispered into her hair. I love you too, Steel Ghost Daddy, she replied, and Ray couldn't help but laugh despite everything. After Emma finally fell asleep in her own bed, Ray sat in the darkness of his living room, staring at his cell phone. He had 3 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize and a text message from Master Chen that simply read, "We need to talk, tomorrow." But it was the email notification that made his blood run cold. The message was from a news outlet he had never heard of, but the subject line made his stomach drop. Interview request. Viral dojo video. With trembling fingers, Ray opened the email and read words that confirmed his worst fears. Someone had uploaded a video of the fight to social media. despite Marcus Chen's claim that he had deleted the recording copies had apparently been made. The footage was already spreading across multiple platforms, gathering views and shares at an exponential rate. Ray quickly opened his laptop and searched for his name online. What he found made him feel sick. Mysterious janitor destroys 2 black belts in epic dojo showdown. Watch humble cleaner reveals hidden martial arts skills. Viral video. David versus Goliath in Portland martial arts studio. The video itself had been shared thousands of times already, with more uploads appearing by the minute. Different angles, different quality levels, all showing the same devastating few minutes that had destroyed the anonymity Ray had spent 3 years building. But worse than the video itself were the comments. Amateur internet detectives were already trying to identify him, speculating about his background, sharing theories about his training. It was only a matter of time before someone connected Ray Walker, the janitor, to the steel ghost of military legend. His phone rang, startling him from his increasingly panicked thoughts. The caller ID showed a number with a Seattle area code, close enough to be local media, far enough to suggest that the story was already spreading beyond Portland. Ray didn't answer. The phone rang again immediately, then again. By the 4th call, Ray turned the device off entirely and sat in the darkness, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening to his life. He had faced down enemy soldiers, survived IED explosions, endured interrogation by experts trained to break the human spirit. But none of that compared to the terror he felt now, watching his carefully constructed, peaceful existence crumble in real time. A soft knock at his door made every muscle in his body tense. It was past 11 o'clock, too late for casual visitors, too early for true emergencies. Ray moved toward the door with the silent grace that had once made him a ghost in enemy territory, his senses hyper-alert for any sign of danger. "Mr. Walker." The voice was young, nervous, unfamiliar. "My name is Jake Morrison from Channel 7 News. I was hoping we could have a quick conversation about the incident at the Crimson Tiger Dojo tonight." Ray said nothing, but his mind was already racing. The media had found his address. That meant they had probably found his employment records. His daughter's school, every detail of the quiet life he had tried so hard to protect. "Sir, I understand you might be concerned about privacy," the reporter continued, "but this story is already out there. Wouldn't you prefer to control the narrative? Tell your side of what happened. Control the narrative, as if there was any controlling the hurricane that was about to descend on their lives." Ray had seen what happened when military operations went public, how the media circus could destroy lives with casual indifference to truth or consequences. "I have nothing to say," Ray called through the door, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Walker, we know about your military service. We know about the commendations, the classified missions, the nickname that soldiers still whisper about in bars from Fort Bragg to Kandahar. The Steel Ghost is a legend, sir. People deserve to know that an American hero is living among them." The words hit Ray like physical blows. They knew. Somehow, in the space of a few hours, his most carefully guarded secrets had been laid bare. The protective anonymity that had allowed him to build a normal life for Emma was gone forever. "Please leave," Ray said, his voice carrying enough authority to make the reporter take a step back from the door. "Sir, with respect, this story is going to run with or without your cooperation. At least give me a statement. Let people know who you really are." "I know who I am," Ray replied. "I'm a father. That's all that matters." After several more minutes of unsuccessful pleading, the reporter finally left. But Ray knew it was only the beginning. By morning, there would be more of them. Camera crews, print journalists, bloggers looking for clicks. Social media influencers chasing the next viral sensation. The quiet apartment that had been their sanctuary would become ground zero for a media-feeding frenzy. Ray spent the rest of the night making plans. Emergency bags for him and Emma, cash withdrawal from their meager savings account, routes out of the city that would avoid major highways and traffic cameras. He had hoped never to use these skills again, but survival was survival, whether in the mountains of Afghanistan or the suburbs of Portland. At 6 in the morning, his phone rang. This time it was a number he recognized, Master Chen. "They are outside my dojo," the old master said without preamble. "News vans, reporters, people with cameras and microphones. The story has grown." Ray felt his stomach sink. How bad? Bad. Someone has connected you to your military record. They are calling you a war hero, Ray. A living legend who fought for his country and now mops floors in obscurity. I'm not a hero, Ray said quietly. Heroes don't survive when everyone else dies. Perhaps, Master Chen replied, but that is not how the world will see it. And the Hale sisters, they have issued a statement. What kind of statement? They claim they were assaulted by an unstable veteran with PTSD. They are calling for an investigation into how someone with your background was allowed to work around children. They want you arrested. The words hit Ray like a sledgehammer. He had expected retaliation, but not something this calculated, this designed to destroy not just his reputation, but his relationship with Emma. If they could paint him as unstable, as dangerous to children. Daddy! Emma's sleepy voice came from her bedroom doorway. Why are you talking so early? Ray ended the call quickly, but not before Master Chen's final words reached him. Come to the dojo. We need to prepare for war. Just some work stuff, sweetheart, Ray told Emma, forcing his voice to remain calm. How about we make pancakes for breakfast? But as Emma brightened at the prospect of her favorite breakfast, Ray was already calculating how long they had before the media circus found their apartment. Emma's school would be next reporters trying to interview her teachers, her classmates, anyone who could provide details about the mysterious janitor's daughter. While Emma ate her pancakes and chattered about a science project she was working on, Ray watched the morning news on his phone. The story had made national headlines overnight. Portland janitor's secret identity revealed, meet the steel ghost. Viral video shows war heroes' hidden skills. Billionaire heiresses claim assault by decorated veteran. The coverage was already splitting along predictable lines. Some outlets portrayed Ray as an American hero, unfairly forced into menial labor, while others focused on the Hale sisters' allegations of assault and PTSD-related instability. The truth, as always, was lost somewhere in the middle. Daddy, Emma said, looking up from her breakfast with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. Are you okay? You look worried. Ray knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his larger ones. Emma, sweetheart, some things are going to change today. People are going to want to talk to us about what happened last night at the dojo. You mean reporters? Emma asked with the matter-of-fact tone of a generation raised on 24-hour news cycles. Yes, and they might ask you questions about me, about our family, about things that are private. I need you to remember that you don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to. Okay? Emma nodded solemnly. Are we in trouble? No, baby, we're not in trouble. But some people are trying to make trouble for us, and we need to be careful. The sound of vehicles pulling into the apartment complex parking lot made Ray's blood run cold. Through the kitchen window, he could see news vans emblazoned with logos from multiple television stations. Reporters were already setting up cameras, adjusting equipment, preparing for what would undoubtedly be a long siege. Emma, Ray said, his voice taking on the calm authority he had once used to give orders in combat zones. I need you to go pack your backpack with clothes for a few days. We're going to visit Master Chen for a while. Are we running away? Emma asked, and the question cut straight to Ray's heart. We're not running away, he said firmly. We're choosing our battlefield. 20 minutes later, Ray and Emma slipped out the back exit of their apartment complex, using a route that took them through neighboring buildings and side streets. Ray's military training served them well as they avoided the media encampment that had formed around their front door. The Crimson Tiger dojo was equally besieged when they arrived, but Master Chen was waiting for them at the rear entrance. The old master looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept at all. They have been here since dawn, Master Chen said as he ushered them inside. Asking questions about you, about last night, about your background. I have told them nothing, but they don't need you to tell them anything, Ray finished. They have their story already. Emma looked around the dojo with wide eyes. Even with the blinds drawn and the doors locked, they could hear the commotion outside, reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking, the general chaos of a media feeding frenzy. Master Chen, Emma said politely. Why do all those people want to talk about my daddy? The old master knelt to Emma's level, his weathered face kind but serious. "Your father did something very brave last night, little one. And sometimes when people do brave things, other people want to tell stories about it." "But Daddy does brave things every day," Emma replied with the simple logic of childhood. "He takes care of me all by himself. He works hard to make money for food and rent. He reads me stories even when he's really tired. Isn't that brave too?" Master Chen's eyes misted slightly at the child's words. "Yes," he said softly. "That is perhaps the bravest thing of all." Ray's phone buzzed with yet another call from an unknown number. He had stopped answering hours ago, but the calls kept coming. Reporters, producers, book agents, movie studios, everyone wanted a piece of the Steel Ghost story. "Ray," Master Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of hard decisions, "we need to discuss your options." "I have options. You always have options. The question is which ones you can live with." Master Chen led them to his private office behind the main dojo floor. The small room was lined with photographs spanning decades of martial arts history, famous Masters tournament champions, students who had gone on to greatness. In the center of his desk sat a laptop computer displaying a news website. "The Hale sisters held a press conference an hour ago," Master Chen said grimly. "They are claiming that you attacked them without provocation, that you represent a danger to the community, that your military background indicates possible PTSD-related instability." Ray read the headlines with growing dread. The Hale family's wealth and influence were already shaping the narrative, turning him from a father defending his daughter into an unstable veteran who had snapped under pressure. "They have lawyers," Master Chen continued, "and those lawyers are very good at their jobs. They are pushing for criminal charges for a restraining order that would keep you away from the dojo and potentially away from Emma's school." "They can't take her away from me," Ray said, his voice low and dangerous. "I won't let them." "They don't need to take her away," Master Chen replied sadly. "They just need to make your life so difficult that you can't provide for her properly. Force you to choose between fighting them and caring for your daughter." Emma, who had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. "What if we told everyone the truth?" Both men turned to look at her. Ray's 8-year-old daughter sat in an oversized chair, her legs swinging freely as she considered the problem with the same methodical approach she used for everything else. "What truth, sweetheart?" Ray asked. "That those ladies were being mean to me," Emma said simply. "That they said bad things and tried to make me feel small. That you were just protecting me like daddies are supposed to do." The simplicity of her words cut through all the legal complexities and media manipulation. At its core, the story was exactly what Emma had described: a father protecting his child from bullies. "Out of the mouths of babes," Master Chen murmured. "She's right, Ray. The truth is your strongest weapon." "The truth," Ray laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I'm a killer who got lucky enough to survive when better men didn't. The truth is that I wake up screaming from nightmares about things I did in service to my country. The truth is that some days I can barely function, let alone be the father Emma deserves." "Daddy," Emma said softly, climbing down from her chair to approach him. "That's not the truth about you." "It's not—" "No," she said with absolute certainty. "The truth about you is that you love me more than anything in the whole world. The truth is that you work really hard to take care of me. The truth is that you're the best daddy ever, even when you're sad about mommy." Ray felt tears threatening for the first time since Sarah's funeral. His daughter's unwavering faith in him was both a blessing and a burden, a reminder of who he wanted to be, not who he feared he was. "She's right," Master Chen said quietly. "The man I watched last night wasn't a killer. He was a protector. There's a difference, Ray, and the world needs to see it." Before Ray could respond, Marcus Chen burst through the office door, his young face flushed with excitement and fear. "Grandfather," the boy said breathlessly, "you need to see this. Now." Master Chen frowned at his grandson's breach of etiquette, but the urgency in Marcus's voice was unmistakable. They followed the boy to the main dojo floor, where he had set up a laptop computer connected to the large television screen used for training videos. "I've been monitoring social media," Marcus explained as he pulled up various websites. "The story is spreading, but it's not going the way the Hale sisters expected." On the screen, Ray could see dozens of posts, comments, and videos related to the dojo incident. But instead of condemning him, the vast majority of the responses were supportive. "Check this out," Marcus said, clicking on a video that had already been viewed over 1 million times. It was security footage from the dojo, apparently from a camera that none of them had known existed. The angle was perfect to show Ava and Sierra's treatment of Emma, their dismissive cruelty toward a small child who had done nothing wrong. "The whole thing is there," Marcus continued excitedly. "Them blocking Emma from the water fountain, making fun of her, calling her daddy a coward. People are seeing what really happened." Ray watched in amazement as comment after comment rolled past on the screen. Those rich girls were bullying a little kid. Her father was protecting her. This isn't assault. This is parenting done right. The Steel Ghost is a hero, and these billionaire brats can't handle being shown up. Where can I send donations to help this family? The Hale sisters thought they could control the narrative, Master Chen observed, but they underestimated the power of the truth. Emma clapped her hands together with delight. "See, Daddy, I told you the truth was important." But Ray's relief was tempered by caution. Public opinion was fickle, and the Hale family had resources that most people couldn't imagine. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. As if summoned by his thoughts, Ray's phone rang. This time, the caller ID showed a name he recognized. David Kim, the defense attorney who had helped him navigate the legal system when he first came home from Afghanistan. "Ray," David's voice was tense. "We need to talk. The Hale family has just filed criminal charges against you. Assault, battery, endangering the welfare of a child. They're moving fast, and they have judges who owe them favors." Ray felt the walls closing in around him. "How long do I have?" "There's a warrant being issued as we speak. You need to turn yourself in within 24 hours or they'll send police to find you." Emma looked up at her father with worried eyes. She didn't understand all the legal terminology, but she could read the fear in his voice, the tension in his posture. "Daddy," she whispered, "are the bad ladies going to take you away?" Ray knelt beside his daughter, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens, I need you to remember that I love you more than anything in this world, and that sometimes good people have to fight bad people, even when it's scary." Emma nodded solemnly, her small face set with determination that reminded Ray so much of her mother. "Then we fight them, Daddy. We fight them together." As the media circus continued outside and the legal storm gathered strength, Ray Walker realized that his days of hiding were truly over. The Steel Ghost was about to become very public indeed. And for the first time since the whole nightmare began, he found himself almost looking forward to the battle. The weight of impending legal action hung over the Crimson Tiger dojo like a storm cloud ready to break. Ray stared at his phone, David Kim's words echoing in his mind as the reality of his situation crystallized. 24 hours. That's how long he had before becoming a fugitive in the eyes of the law, before the careful life he had built for Emma crumbled completely. "Daddy," Emma said softly, tugging at his sleeve. "What does warrant mean?" Ray's heart clenched at the innocence in her voice. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that powerful people can manipulate the system to punish those who dare to stand up to them? How do you tell your daughter that the world isn't always fair, especially to people like them? "It means some people think I did something wrong," Ray said carefully, "and they want me to come talk to them about it." "But you didn't do anything wrong," Emma protested with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You protected me. That's what daddies do." Master Chen placed a weathered hand on Ray's shoulder. "She's right, you know. What you did was protect your child. Any father worth the name would have done the same. Try telling that to the Hale family's lawyers." Ray replied bitterly. He looked around the dojo that had become their temporary sanctuary, noting how the afternoon light filtered through the closed blinds, creating patterns on the polished wood floor, where his life had changed forever just 18 hours ago. Marcus Chen looked up from his laptop, his young face troubled. "The news is getting worse," he said quietly. "They're saying you have PTSD, that you're unstable, that you shouldn't be around children without supervision." Ray felt rage building in his chest, not the hot, uncontrolled anger of his youth, but the cold, calculating fury of a man who had learned to channel his emotions into something far more dangerous. The Hale sisters weren't content with destroying his reputation. They wanted to destroy his relationship with Emma. "They can't take her away from me," Ray said, his voice carrying the steel that had once made enemy soldiers flee at the sound of his name. "I won't let that happen." "Ray," Master Chen said gently, "perhaps it's time to consider that running isn't the answer. These people have resources, connections, influence that spans the entire country. Even if you disappear, they'll find you eventually." "Then what do you suggest?" Ray asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Fight back," Master Chen replied simply. "But not with your fists. Fight with the truth." Before Ray could respond, the front door of the dojo opened with a bang that made everyone jump. A woman in an expensive business suit strode through the entrance, flanked by two security guards who looked more like corporate mercenaries than traditional bodyguards. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor like gunshots as she approached. "Mr. Walker," the woman said, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "My name is Victoria Hale. I believe you've met my daughters." Ray felt every muscle in his body tense. Victoria Hale was the matriarch of the Hale dynasty, a woman whose business ruthlessness was legendary, even in circles that prided themselves on cutthroat competition. She was worth approximately $20 billion, controlled a technology empire that spanned 3 continents, and had the kind of political connections that could make problems disappear or create them. "Emma," Ray said quietly, not taking his eyes off Victoria Hale, "go sit with Master Chen." "But Daddy." "Now, sweetheart." Emma reluctantly moved to Master Chen's side, but Ray could see her watching everything with the keen intelligence that both blessed and cursed her. She understood more than she should have at her age, a consequence of losing her mother so young and learning to read the subtle signs of adult stress and fear. Victoria Hale looked around the dojo with the same dismissive expression her daughters had worn, as if everything she saw was somehow beneath her consideration. When her gaze fell on Emma, her lips curved in what might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth whatsoever. "So this is the child," she said, her tone suggesting Emma was a problem to be solved rather than a human being to be acknowledged. "She's quite small for 8, isn't she?" "What do you want?" Ray asked, his voice cutting through whatever game Victoria Hale was trying to play. "I want to resolve this unfortunate situation before it spirals further out of control," she replied, pulling out her phone and showing Ray the screen. "Do you see this 2 million views in less than 12 hours? My daughters are being portrayed as villains in some sort of David and Goliath narrative that frankly insults my intelligence." Ray glanced at the phone screen, which showed dozens of social media posts, news articles, and video compilations all focused on the dojo incident. The overwhelming majority of comments supported him and condemned the Hale sisters for their treatment of Emma. "Maybe your daughters shouldn't have been bullying a child," Ray said flatly. Victoria Hale's laugh was like ice cracking. "Mr. Walker, you have a very limited understanding of how the world works. My daughters are worth more money than you could earn in 1,000 lifetimes. They are job creators, innovators, pillars of their community. You are a mentally unstable veteran who attacked 2 young women because you couldn't control your temper." "That's not what happened," Emma said suddenly, her small voice carrying clearly across the dojo. "They were mean to me first." Victoria Hale turned her cold gaze on Emma, and Ray felt something predatory stir in his chest. The look in the woman's eyes wasn't just dismissive, it was calculating, measuring, as if she was trying to determine exactly how much leverage an 8-year-old girl might provide. "Children often misremember events," Victoria said smoothly, "especially traumatized children who have witnessed violence in their home environment." The implication was clear and vicious. She was suggesting that Ray was violent toward Emma, that his daughter was an unreliable witness, because she had been conditioned to fear her father. It was a masterpiece of character assassination designed to plant seeds of doubt in anyone who might be inclined to believe Emma's version of events. "You're walking a very dangerous line," Ray said, his voice dropping to the quiet tone that had once made Taliban commanders wet themselves in fear. "Am I?" Victoria Hale seemed genuinely amused. Mr. Walker, I think you're confused about our respective positions in this confrontation. I'm offering you a way out of a situation that will otherwise destroy you completely. She gestured to one of her security guards who produced a manila folder thick with legal documents. A settlement agreement, she explained, placing the folder on a nearby bench. $1 million paid immediately in exchange for a public apology, and your agreement to never speak about this incident again. The silence in the dojo was absolute. $1 million was more money than Ray had ever dreamed of possessing. It was enough to give Emma the kind of life he had always wanted for her private school's college tuition, a house in a safe neighborhood, financial security that would last for years. And if I refuse, Ray asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then the full weight of my family's resources will be brought to bear against you, Victoria replied with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Criminal charges are just the beginning. We'll challenge your fitness as a parent. We'll audit your taxes going back 7 years. We'll contact every employer you've ever had, every landlord, every person who has ever done business with you. We'll make your life so difficult that you'll spend every waking moment in courtrooms fighting legal battles you can't afford to win. Master Chen stepped forward, his aged face hard with anger. This is extortion. This is reality, Victoria Hale corrected. Mr. Walker can choose to accept a generous settlement for what was, let's be honest, a minor altercation that has been blown out of proportion. Or he can choose to fight a war he cannot possibly win. Ray looked at the folder of legal documents, then at Emma, who was watching the entire exchange with eyes far too old for her face. His daughter had already lost so much. Her mother, her sense of security, the carefree innocence that every child deserved. How could he choose his pride over her future? Daddy, Emma said quietly, and something in her voice made every adult in the room look at her. Remember what you told me about bullies? Ray's throat tightened. What did I tell you, sweetheart? You said that if you give bullies what they want, they never stop asking for more. The simple wisdom of those words hit Ray like a lightning bolt. Emma was right. Victoria Hale wasn't offering a solution, she was establishing dominance. Today it would be a public apology and a promise of silence. Tomorrow it would be something else. The Hale family would own him, and by extension, they would own Emma. You're right, baby, Ray said, his voice growing stronger with each word. Bullies never stop. He picked up the folder of legal documents and handed it back to Victoria Hale without opening it. I decline your generous offer. Victoria's composure cracked slightly, revealing the steel underneath. You're making a mistake, Mr. Walker. A very expensive mistake. Maybe, Ray replied, but it's my mistake to make. So be it, Victoria said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could have frozen fire. But understand this, I will destroy you. Not just your reputation, not just your career, but everything you care about. That little girl will grow up knowing that her father chose his ego over her welfare. Get out, Ray said quietly. Excuse me. I said get out. Ray's voice carried the authority of a man who had once commanded respect in the world's most dangerous places. You're not welcome here. Victoria Hale stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand how a janitor, a nobody, could dare to dismiss her. Finally, she turned on her heel and stalked toward the door, her security guards following like well-trained attack dogs. 24 hours, Mr. Walker, she called over her shoulder. After that, you become a fugitive, and fugitives can't provide for their children, can they? The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving the dojo in shocked silence. Ray felt Emma's small hand slip into his, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture of support that nearly broke his heart. Did I do the right thing? Ray asked Master Chen, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. You did the only thing a man with honor could do, Master Chen replied. But Emma is right, this is far from over. Marcus Chen looked up from his laptop with excitement. Actually, it might be more over than you think. Look at this. On the screen was a news report from Seattle showing Ava and Sierra Hale leaving what appeared to be a police station. Both women looked haggard, their usual polished appearance replaced by the disheveled look of people under extreme stress. The video evidence has complicated their story, Marcus explained. Witnesses are coming forward, people who saw the whole thing. The narrative is shifting. Ray watched as the reporter interviewed several students from the dojo, all of whom corroborated Emma's version of events. The Hale sisters weren't being portrayed as victims anymore. They were being seen as privileged bullies who had gotten their comeuppance. But will it be enough? Ray asked. Before anyone could answer, Ray's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Kim's number, and Ray answered immediately. "Ray, where are you?" David's voice was tight with urgency. "Don't go home. Don't go to Emma's school. Don't go anywhere predictable. The warrant has been issued, but something strange is happening." "What do you mean strange?" "The district attorney's office is getting flooded with calls. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. People supporting you demanding that the charges be dropped. I've never seen anything like it." Ray looked around the dojo at the faces of people who had become his unlikely allies. Master Chen with his quiet wisdom, Marcus with his technological savvy, Emma with her unwavering faith in her father's goodness. "There's something else," David continued. "Someone leaked Victoria Hale's visit to your location. There's footage of her threatening you, demanding that you take a settlement to avoid prosecution. It's all over social media." Marcus was already pulling up the video on his laptop. Sure enough, there was clear footage of Victoria Hale's threats, her casual mention of destroying Ray's life, her obvious attempts to manipulate the legal system to her family's advantage. "The public is outraged," David explained. "They're calling it a clear example of wealthy elites using the justice system as their personal weapon. Politicians are starting to distance themselves from the Hale family." Ray felt a spark of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. "What does that mean for the charges?" "It means you might want to turn yourself in after all," David said. "But not because you're guilty, because you're about to become the most sympathetic defendant in America." Emma tugged on Ray's sleeve. "Daddy, what's sympathetic defendant mean?" Ray knelt beside his daughter, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "It means people understand that sometimes good people have to do difficult things to protect the people they love. Like what you did for me. Exactly like what I did for you." Master Chen approached them, his weathered face thoughtful. "Ray, I've been thinking about what Victoria Hale said about this being a war you cannot win. She's wrong." "How so?" "She's thinking in terms of money and influence, lawyers and political connections. But this isn't that kind of war anymore. This is a war of ideas, of values, of what kind of society we want to live in." Ray considered the old master's words as he watched Marcus scrolling through hundreds of supportive comments and messages. People from all walks of life were sharing their own stories of standing up to bullies, of protecting their children, of refusing to be intimidated by those with more power and resources. "The Hale family made a critical error," Master Chen continued. "They assumed that everyone would be as cynical as they are, that people would side with wealth and privilege over justice and decency. They were wrong." Emma looked up at her father with shining eyes. "So we're winning." Ray smiled at his daughter's optimism, even as he recognized that the battle was far from over. "We're not losing, sweetheart. And sometimes not losing is the first step toward winning." His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Walker, this is Sarah Jacobson from 60 Minutes. We would like to offer you the opportunity to tell your story to America. No ambush interviews, no gotcha questions, just the truth in your own words." Ray showed the message to Master Chen, who nodded approvingly. "The truth," the old master said. "That's your strongest weapon." "But what if I say the wrong thing?" Ray asked. "What if I make it worse?" "Daddy," Emma said, with the wisdom that seemed to come naturally to children who had faced real hardship. "You taught me that telling the truth is always right, even when it's scary." Ray looked at his daughter. This brave, brilliant little girl, who had already shown more courage than most adults would ever possess, and felt something shift inside his chest. For 3 years he had been hiding from his past, ashamed of what he had been, terrified of what people would think if they knew the truth about the Steel Ghost. But Emma didn't see a killer when she looked at him. She saw her protector, her hero, the man who had sacrificed everything to give her a better life. Maybe it was time to stop seeing himself through the lens of his failures and start seeing himself through the eyes of his daughter. "You're right, baby," Ray said, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. "The truth is always right." As the afternoon wore on, more supporters began arriving at the dojo. Veterans who had served with distinction and understood the burden of coming home from war. Parents who recognized the lengths they would go to protect their own children. Ordinary people who were tired of watching the wealthy and powerful manipulate the system while good people suffered. Master Chen opened the dojo to all of them, creating an impromptu gathering space where stories were shared, support was offered, and the bonds of community were strengthened. Emma moved through the crowd like a little ambassador, thanking people for their support, sharing her own perspective on what had happened with the innocent honesty that only children possessed. "She's remarkable," said Dr. Patricia Martinez, a child psychologist who had driven from Seattle specifically to offer her professional opinion on Emma's mental state. "Intelligent, well-adjusted, clearly loved and cared for. Any suggestion that this child is in danger from her father is absurd." Ray watched his daughter interact with the growing crowd of supporters and felt a pride so intense it threatened to overwhelm him. Emma had been through so much loss, so much upheaval, yet she remained kind, hopeful, trusting in the goodness of the world. That was his real legacy, not the missions he had completed or the enemies he had defeated, but the beautiful human being he was raising. "Mr. Walker." A young woman with a press badge approached hesitantly. "I'm Lisa Chen, no relation to Master Chen from the Portland Tribune. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions." Ray looked at the reporter, barely out of college, nervous, but determined, and made a decision that would change everything. "Ask away," he said. "How does it feel to know that millions of people see you as a hero?" Ray considered the question carefully. "I'm not a hero," he said finally. "Heroes don't survive when everyone else dies. Heroes don't spend 3 years hiding from who they used to be. I'm just a father who loves his daughter and will do anything to protect her." "But surely your military service—" "My military service taught me that violence is sometimes necessary, but it should never be the first option. What happened at the dojo wasn't about my training or my past. It was about 2 adults bullying a child and a father who decided that enough was enough." "What would you say to the Hale family?" Ray looked across the room at Emma, who was showing one of the veterans her homework with obvious pride. "I would say that money and power can buy you a lot of things, but they can't buy you character. They can't buy you the respect of your community. And they certainly can't buy you the love of a child who sees you as their whole world." The reporter scribbled notes furiously, recognizing that she was witnessing something special. This wasn't just a news story anymore. It was a moment that would define how America saw itself, how it valued courage over wealth, principle over privilege. As the sun began to set over Portland, Ray Walker realized that his days of invisibility were truly over. Tomorrow, he would turn himself in to face whatever charges the Hale family had managed to arrange. But he wouldn't be facing them alone. He would be facing them with the support of thousands of people who believed in justice, with the love of a daughter who saw him as a hero, and with the strength that came from finally accepting who he was, not the steel ghost, not a killer haunted by his past, but a father willing to fight for his child's future. The invisible guardian had become visible, and the world was watching. The dawn of Ray's surrender broke gray and cold over Portland, but the steps of the Multnomah County Courthouse were anything but empty. What had started as a small group of supporters at the Crimson Tiger Dojo had grown into something neither Ray nor the Hale family could have anticipated, a movement that transcended the simple story of a father protecting his daughter. Hundreds of people filled the courthouse plaza, holding signs that read, "Real heroes protect children," and "The Steel Ghost stands for all of us." Veterans in their dress uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with soccer moms, construction workers next to college students, all united by a shared belief that what had happened in that dojo represented something larger than a simple altercation. Ray stood at the window of David Kim's downtown law office, watching the crowd below with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Emma sat in a chair beside his desk, her small legs swinging as she worked on a coloring book that one of the supporters had given her the night before. Daddy, she said without looking up from her careful work. Why are all those people here? Ray knelt beside her chair, his hand gentle on her shoulder. They're here because they believe that sometimes, when you do the right thing, other people will stand with you. Even if it's scary. Especially if it's scary. David Kim emerged from an inner office, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled from an all-night strategy session. The young attorney had taken Ray's case pro bono, recognizing that it represented something far more significant than a simple assault charge. The prosecutor wants to meet, David announced. Informally off the record, they're feeling the pressure from the public response, but the Hale family still has significant influence. Ray nodded, having expected this development. The viral nature of his story had created a public relations nightmare for everyone involved in the prosecution. District attorneys were elected officials, and elected officials paid attention to public opinion. What do they want? Ray asked. Honestly, I think they want a way out that doesn't make them look like they're bowing to public pressure or wealthy donors. Master Chen entered the office quietly, having spent the morning coordinating with the crowd of supporters outside. His weathered face showed the strain of the past few days, but his eyes held the satisfaction of a man who had seen justice beginning to prevail. The media response continues to grow, Master Chen reported. 3 major networks want to interview you after the surrender. The Hale family has gone silent. No statements, no press conferences, no public appearances. Ray understood the significance of that silence. People like Victoria Hale didn't retreat unless they recognized that they were fighting a losing battle. The narrative had shifted so completely that continuing to pursue charges would only damage their reputation further. There's something else, David said, pulling out his phone to show Ray a news alert. Someone leaked internal Hale Industries communications, emails between Victoria Hale and various political figures discussing how to handle the situation with you. Ray read the leaked emails with growing amazement. The messages revealed a coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation, manipulate media coverage, and pressure prosecutors to pursue charges regardless of the evidence. It was exactly the kind of corruption that the public had suspected, but rarely seen documented so clearly. This changes everything, David continued. Public officials are distancing themselves from the Hale family as fast as they can. The prosecutor is in an impossible position: proceed with charges that the public sees as corrupt or drop them and admit that the system was manipulated. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her dark eyes moving between the adults with the perception that had always amazed Ray. Are the bad ladies in trouble now? Yes, sweetheart, Ray said softly. I think they are. The walk to the courthouse felt surreal. Ray had expected to make this journey alone, perhaps with David beside him, prepared to face the consequences of standing up to power. Instead, he found himself surrounded by hundreds of supporters who had gathered to witness what many were calling a turning point in the fight against elite privilege. Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker. Reporters shouted questions as Ray made his way through the crowd, but he kept his focus on the courthouse steps ahead. Emma walked beside him, her small hands secure in his, her head held high with the confidence of a child who knew her father was a good man. The scene inside the courthouse was equally dramatic. The hallways were packed with supporters who couldn't fit in the courtroom, while the media had set up what amounted to a small broadcasting center in the lobby. Ray had never imagined that his story would resonate so broadly, touching on themes of justice, parenting, and the courage to stand up to bullies that seemed to speak to something fundamental in the American character. Judge Patricia Hendricks was a 20-year veteran of the bench known for her no-nonsense approach to justice. She looked out over the packed courtroom with obvious concern about the circus atmosphere that had developed around what should have been a routine arraignment. This court will come to order, Judge Hendricks announced, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. We are here for the arraignment of Raymond Walker on charges of assault in the second degree and harassment. Ray stood with David beside him, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. Behind him, he could hear Emma's whispered conversation with Master Chen, who had promised to keep her company during the proceedings. Your Honor, David said when called upon, the defense waives reading of the charges and enters a plea of not guilty on all counts. So noted, Judge Hendricks replied. Mr. Prosecutor, what is the state's position regarding bail? Ray held his breath, This was the moment that would determine whether he went home with Emma that night or spent the next several months in jail awaiting trial. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man named Robert Chang, stood slowly. Ray could see the conflict in the man's face, the weight of political pressure from above fighting against his recognition of what the evidence actually showed. "Your Honor," Chang began, then paused as if reconsidering his words. The state acknowledges that this case has generated significant public interest, and that the evidence is complex. Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Chang, that's not what I asked you. What is your position on bail?" Chang glanced back at the packed courtroom, then at Ray, then at the stack of files on his table that undoubtedly contained the evidence that had turned his slam-dunk case into a public relations disaster. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence that has come to light, and given the defendant's ties to the community and lack of criminal history, the state would not oppose release on his own recognizance." A collective exhale seemed to rise from the courtroom. Ray felt his knees nearly buckle with relief, while behind him Emma let out a small cheer that made several spectators smile despite the formal setting. "Furthermore," Chang continued, his voice growing stronger as he made what was clearly a difficult decision, "the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Walker." The courtroom erupted. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the celebration was impossible to contain. Ray turned to see Emma jumping up and down in her seat, her face radiant with joy. "Mr. Chang," Judge Hendricks said when order was finally restored, "this is highly unusual. Are you certain about this motion?" "Yes, Your Honor. The state's review of all available evidence, including video footage and witness statements, indicates that Mr. Walker was acting in defense of his minor daughter who was being harassed and intimidated by the alleged victims. The state cannot in good conscience proceed with charges under these circumstances." Ray felt tears threatening for the first time since Sarah's funeral. The nightmare was over. Emma was safe. They could go home and begin rebuilding their lives. "Motion granted," Judge Hendricks announced. "All charges against Raymond Walker are hereby dismissed. Mr. Walker, you are free to go." The celebration outside the courthouse was unlike anything Portland had seen in years. Supporters cheered, cameras flashed, and reporters scrambled to capture the moment when David defeated Goliath in the modern age. Ray found himself lifted onto the shoulders of veterans who had served in the same conflicts he had carried above a crowd that saw him as a symbol of something larger than himself. "Daddy!" Emma's voice rose above the noise, and Ray immediately asked to be put down. His daughter ran to him through the crowd, launching herself into his arms with the fearless trust that had sustained them both through the darkest times. "We won, Daddy," she said, her arms tight around his neck. "We won." "Yes, sweetheart," Ray whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We won." But even as he celebrated with Emma and accepted the congratulations of hundreds of supporters, Ray noticed a black sedan pulling away from the courthouse. Through the tinted windows, he caught a glimpse of platinum blonde hair and knew that the Hale sisters were watching their carefully constructed narrative collapse in real time. The victory was complete, but Ray had learned enough about people like the Hales to know that they wouldn't simply disappear. They would retreat, regroup, and find other ways to exercise their power. But they would also remember this day, remember that their wealth and influence had limits, remember that sometimes ordinary people could stand up and fight back. 3 months later, Ray stood in the same spot where it all began, the main floor of the Crimson Tiger dojo. But everything had changed. The space that had once been his place of invisible employment had become something entirely different. The Phoenix Way Academy occupied not just the original dojo, but 3 additional buildings that had been purchased with donations from supporters around the world. What had started as a viral video had evolved into a movement, a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching children and adults how to stand up to bullies while building genuine self-confidence and character. "Daddy, look," Emma called from across the main training floor, where she was leading a group of younger children through basic self-defense movements. At 11 years old now, she had grown into a confident, articulate young woman who carried herself with the quiet strength that came from knowing she was loved unconditionally. Ray smiled as he watched his daughter work with the children. She had become the heart of the Phoenix Way Academy, the living example of what the organization stood for. Her natural empathy and hard-won wisdom made her a gifted teacher, and her story continued to inspire people around the world. "How are the enrollment numbers looking?" asked Dr. Patricia Martinez, the child psychologist, who had become the Academy's clinical director. She had left her private practice to join the organization full-time, convinced that what they were building represented a new approach to developing resilience in children. "Beyond anything we projected," Ray replied, reviewing the tablet that showed registration data from Phoenix Way locations in 12 states. "We're getting applications from families who drive hundreds of miles to participate in our programs." Master Chen approached from his office, where he had been conducting a video conference with martial arts instructors in Japan, who wanted to implement Phoenix Way principles in their own schools. At 75, the old master had found a new purpose in life, serving as the Academy's chief instructor and philosophical guide. "The documentary crew wants to conduct final interviews next week," Master Chen informed them. "The producer says they have distribution commitments from 3 major streaming services." The documentary about Ray's story had been in production for over a year, following not just the events at the dojo, but the transformation that had followed. It chronicled the growth of the Phoenix Way movement, the impact on families around the world, and the ongoing efforts to reform how society dealt with bullying and abuse of power. "Any word from the Hale family?" Dr. Martinez asked. Ray's expression darkened slightly. The Hale sisters had largely disappeared from public view after the charges were dismissed, but their mother, Victoria, had proven to be more resilient. She had repositioned herself as a champion of criminal justice reform, claiming that her family's experience had opened her eyes to the problems with the system. "Victoria Hale is scheduled to testify before Congress next month," Ray said. "She's supporting legislation that would prevent wealthy individuals from manipulating the prosecution of cases." "The irony is breathtaking," Dr. Martinez observed. "The irony is strategic," Master Chen corrected. "She's attempting to control the narrative again, to position herself as part of the solution rather than the problem." Emma finished her class and jogged over to join the adults. Her face flushed with the satisfaction that came from good work well done. "Mrs. Patterson wants to know if we can start an advanced program for teenagers," she reported. "She says her son is ready for more challenging material." "What do you think?" Ray asked his daughter, genuinely interested in her opinion. Emma had an intuitive understanding of the Academy's mission that often surprised the adults around her. "I think we should," Emma replied thoughtfully. "But we need to be careful about making sure they understand that being strong means protecting people, not intimidating them." Ray felt the familiar surge of pride that came with watching his daughter navigate complex issues with wisdom beyond her years. She had grown up in the spotlight of the Phoenix Way movement, but instead of being damaged by the attention, she had thrived in her role as both student and teacher. "Speaking of teenagers," Dr. Martinez said with a slight smile, "we had an interesting application this week." She handed Ray a tablet showing an enrollment form. Ray's eyes widened as he read the name at the top, Sierra Hale, age 19. "She wants to join the Academy?" Ray asked, unable to hide his surprise. "She wants to volunteer," Dr. Martinez corrected. She submitted a 5-page essay about her experiences, about recognizing her past behavior as bullying, and about wanting to learn how to use her privilege constructively. Ray stared at the application, reading Sierra's carefully written words about regret, growth, and the desire to make amends. It was either a genuine transformation or a sophisticated attempt at rehabilitation, possibly both. "What does Emma think?" Ray asked, because his daughter's opinion had become one of the most important factors in major Academy decisions. Emma considered the question with the same seriousness she applied to all important matters. "I think people can change," she said finally. "Mommy always said that the best thing about making mistakes is the chance to learn from them." Ray felt his chest tighten at the mention of Sarah. Even after 4 years, Emma's casual references to her mother could still catch him off guard with their emotional power. But he also recognized the wisdom in Sarah's words filtered through their daughter's innate compassion. "We'll need safeguards," Dr. Martinez said. "Supervision, clear boundaries, a probationary period. And complete transparency," Master Chen added. "No special treatment because of her family name, but also no persecution because of past actions." Ray nodded, recognizing that this decision would test the Academy's commitment to its principles. The Phoenix Way was supposed to be about redemption, about helping people rise from their mistakes to become better versions of themselves. Refusing Sierra's application would be hypocritical. Accepting it would be risky. Schedule an interview, Ray decided, but Emma sits in on it. Me? Emma looked surprised. Why? Because you're the one she hurt, Ray replied simply. If anyone has the right to evaluate her sincerity, it's you. That evening, Ray and Emma walked home through the Portland streets that had become familiar territory once again. The media attention had largely died down, replaced by the steady work of building something meaningful from the chaos that had disrupted their lives. Their new apartment was larger than the old one, funded by book deals and speaking engagements that had followed Ray's story. But he had been careful to maintain the same sense of home that had sustained them through their darkest times. Emma's artwork still covered the refrigerator, Sarah's photographs still smiled from every surface, and the simple routines of dinner and homework and bedtime stories continued to anchor their days. "Daddy," Emma said as they waited at the same crosswalk where they had discussed the meaning of strength years earlier. "Do you ever miss being invisible?" The question caught Ray off guard with its perceptiveness. At 11, Emma understood complexities that many adults struggled to grasp. Sometimes, Ray admitted, there was something peaceful about knowing that we could live our lives without anyone watching, without having to think about what our choices meant to other people. "But we're helping people now," Emma pointed out. "Kids who used to feel scared and small like I did that night at the dojo. Isn't that worth being visible?" Ray looked down at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had inherited her mother's compassion and her father's strength, and felt a familiar surge of awe at how she had grown. The scared 8-year-old who had watched her father fight for her honor had become a confident teacher who helped other children find their own courage. "Yes," Ray said softly, "it's definitely worth it." As they reached their building, Emma suddenly stopped and pointed across the street. "Daddy, look." Ray followed her gaze and saw a small group of teenagers gathered around a younger boy who was obviously being bullied. The dynamic was clear. Multiple aggressors, single victim, the kind of situation that played out in schoolyards and neighborhoods around the world every day. 4 years ago, Ray would have looked away, unwilling to get involved in other people's problems. The Steel Ghost would have calculated the tactical situation and chosen the most efficient way to neutralize the threat. But the man Ray had become through his daughter's love and the Phoenix Way's mission chose a different approach. "Emma," he said quietly, "want to go practice what we preach?" Emma's face lit up with understanding and determination. Together. Together. They crossed the street side by side, father and daughter approaching a situation that required not violence, but courage, not force, but compassion, not the skills of a soldier, but the wisdom of teachers who understood that real strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. "Excuse me," Ray said as they approached the group, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded respect in the world's most dangerous places. "Is there a problem here?" The teenagers turned to face them, their expressions shifting from predatory confidence to uncertainty as they recognized Ray from news coverage and social media. The boy they had been tormenting looked up with hope and relief, recognizing allies in the most unexpected place. "It's the Steel Ghost," one of the bullies whispered, and Ray could hear both fear and awe in the boy's voice. "Actually," Emma said, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who had learned to stand up for others, "he's just my dad, and I'm Emma. We run a program that teaches people how to solve problems without hurting each other. Would you like to hear about it?" What followed was a 20-minute conversation that transformed a potential violent confrontation into an impromptu lesson about empathy, conflict resolution, and the difference between strength and aggression. By the end, the would-be bullies had exchanged contact information with their intended victim, all of them interested in visiting the Phoenix Way Academy to learn more about building genuine confidence rather than imposing dominance through fear. As Ray and Emma finally headed home, the 11-year-old girl slipped her hand into her father's with the casual affection that had sustained them both through years of loss and growth. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, I think Mommy would be proud of who we became." Ray felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. Sarah would indeed be proud, not just of the man he had become, but of the extraordinary daughter they had raised together, the movement they had built from a moment of crisis, and the lives they had touched through their willingness to stand up for what was right. "Yes, sweetheart," Ray whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I think she would be very proud." The steel ghost was gone forever, buried beneath the weight of a father's love and a teacher's mission. In his place stood Ray Walker, protector-educator, and living proof that redemption was possible for anyone willing to choose love over fear, courage over comfort, and service over self. The invisible guardian had become visible, and in becoming visible he had learned the most important truth of all. Real heroes aren't the ones who fight in shadows or legends whispered in the darkness. Real heroes are the ones who choose to stand in the light, knowing that their actions will be judged, their mistakes magnified, their humanity exposed for all to see. They choose to stand anyway, because someone has to show the world that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're protecting something worth fighting for. Ray Walker had found his worth fighting for in the form of a little girl with dark hair and wise eyes. And in protecting her, he had discovered that he was protecting something much larger. The idea that goodness could triumph over power, that justice could prevail over influence, and that sometimes, just sometimes, David really could defeat Goliath. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of his old life, and it soared not on wings of violence or vengeance, but on wings of love, redemption, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserved a chance to become the hero of their own story. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.